Alright, so what I'm going to do here is just show a little breakdown of how I would lay out a pinup or whatnot. And I can always use new content for my 94 comic book series. So I'm going to do a Ragetality piece. Yeah, so this is just top of my head. I don't have any real purpose for it. I'm going to use it for something at some point, though. Alright, so the way that it'll work, this is an 11 by 17 board. Kind of guesstimate about, where the trim's going to be, probably about a 1/4 inch or so. This pencil might be too light. So that's about the area where the safe area is going to end. Sometimes on panel work, it's going to be within this amount of area of an original. And that would be for text. Artwork, you can... It's comics. There's general guides, and they're all meant to be broken. The text rule, though, you don't want to break. Last thing you really need is to have word balloons going off the paper, getting trimmed off, and that's then people will have to guess what's going on. It's an eyesore. So anyhow, go kind of old school the way I used to work in shapes. So I'll just start with like a triangle, I guess, and kind of see. So I'm gonna just sort of I'll break this piece up to a triangle, but I'm gonna have it kind of off-centered. So we'll just kind of run like this. So I already know that I want the focal point to kind of flow in this direction, similar to a sequential page in a way. There's a lot of things you can do to help that with character placement, limb placement, shadows. The list goes on. But I'm not really going to focus on that right now since this is just a pinup piece. So had a general idea of just a Rage maybe just getting absolutely destroyed. So that is one of the things that I do in the book a lot, is he tends to not really come out on top in a lot of situations. Actually, most situations, that's almost the premise of the book. Alright, so like most artists, I usually start with kind of where the head would be. And then the size of it kind of delegates the size of the body that you go. Like most comic artists, I probably go like 9 on male characters. I probably go like 9 heads high. Not realistic proportions. I didn't choose comics as a medium because I liked drawing realistically. There are artists who do. I prefer the fantasy side. I like the super exaggerated poses, and just creates a more fun experience as an artist too, I think. So I'll probably bring in his torso right here. I don't know, this is probably very common for most artists. You kind of work out like where the rib cage, the center line of where you want the character, the hips. I kind of build my characters almost like action figures or like a Transformer toy, where you can see the joints, you can see the hips, you can see the shoulders. Although there were a lot of toys in the 80s which were not articulated very well, and I think that's why franchises like G.I. Joe and Transformers did so well, is because they were up against figure lines like even the Star Wars, the original Star Wars figures were very stiff, and they went one direction. And then you had the Joes, which twist at the hip all of a sudden because they used the rubber band inside, and they had elbows, they could like point their gun more than just straight. So I'm kind of a product of both. If I draw something that looks super stiff, I'm going to blame it on the 80s. All right, so yeah, I'm already pretty much committed to this. Now, if I didn't like this and I was like, oh, I want to see the entire leg here, right? Like not bent, whatnot. All this stuff would have to get shrunk. This would come down to about this size. The head would probably be shrunk about a half. So that's one thing to consider when you're working on stuff, especially like I was showing, starting on the head. Once you commit to that size, everything else kind of conforms to it. You can play with it and adjust it as well when you gotta have like some extreme angle, some perspective. Play with perspective a lot. You can have like a bird's eye view, and the feet are very tiny because of how far away you push that camera angle, the camera of your mind. I think that's really the only time that I will use photograph reference, is when it's something that I can't really imagine. And like the idea, so the concept I have behind this, there was actually a cover that that Dan Frega actually had illustrated a ways back on, I think it was Bloodstrike, but he did one where he was tore up, and it was a pretty cool piece. For just showing how like obliterated a character could look, and look very cool at the same time. Alright, and so I'm not really sure about where I'm kind of going with this with the forearm, so I do know that I want an insane weapon, but I want it to have some weight to it, so I'm going to have it pointing down, not being used. So I might just create an area here where the wrist is kind of flipped. This is how I do most of my own personal stuff. I'm not a huge fan of the layout process. I will do thumbnails and things like that, but I don't necessarily feel that the energy stays when I work in the way that I used to work, which was I would do these itty bitty thumbnails, and then show, oh, this character is punching this character, and whatever, and then I would blow that up and do a lightbox trace of that, and it just became a little tedious. There was things like in the thumbnails even I would notice that I liked, and I didn't really feel like I could capture them, and I've kind of figured out with this stuff, there's a lot more kind of ad-libbing that happens in the sketching side that you can only really get the first time around, and so and that might just be a me thing. There might be other people who completely work the other way because they have the opposite experience, but that's my experience for my own stuff. So I always kind of cringe when I have clients or they're like, oh, can you send me some thumbnails first? And I'm like, yes, I can. But it's not my I kind of already know what's going to happen on the creation side of what occurs with me personally on it. Yeah, so I'm just kind of laying out his little headgear here. So yeah, this recording I'm just gonna do a little bit of the layout and maybe some rough pencils, and then call it. Might do a separate, an actual stream for the inking side of that. I had done a live show, not a podcast, just a stream. I'd done a stream with somebody, and they were just kind of talking about how like I have just this ridiculousness with this Ragetality character from the '94 books that I put out. And I was like, yeah, it's really just, it's my way of kind of continuing to draw the stuff that I like, even though a lot of it's been sort of overlooked or kind of pulled from mainstream. And that's one of the cool things about indie books, you know, like when you're your own boss, you're doing your own thing. You just kind of do it. Don't try to, like, I'm not creating and illustrating my own book to try to make a Marvel book. I want to do it my way. I want it to be professional looking, you know, obviously, but you know, I'm not checking off any boxes with anything that I create. It's all just what I feel like I want my book to do, what I want it to kind of represent with myself. And I like seeing other people's iterations of my characters and all that too. It's funny to see. Sometimes they would do like a rage piece, Ragetality. They do a piece of him, and it'd be very much like something you would see, like on a Deadpool cover, you know, things like that. And I think that's cool. But also it's kind of silly to see. You know, it's like if I created a character who flies. You know, there's a very like basic kind of, you know, you already know you're probably going to get a Superman-esque pose. I always find it interesting though, like when you get something completely different, you know. Ragetality eating a pot pie. You know, I mean, that kind of stuff is cool too, and that's the stuff that the stuff that breaks the mold is always the coolest. Not that everything should, it's just it is nice when you get stuff that's a little different. So yeah, and I'm thinking with this weapon, I always go, I usually just, with him, I'll usually just play with swords, like just holding 2 or 3 in one hand at once, and the other hand has 2, or, you know, gun, you know, popping off. There's the other thing too. This is a one-off, so this gun is not like canon to anything. Anything regarding the book or the story, so I'll probably go nuts with these. that's something else that I used to do. So you'll notice I got pretty decent, lines that run about, probably 4 inches max, 3.5 inches. I can get them pretty straight, and I think it just comes from lots and lots of practice of trying to draw straight lines. And not being too critical of myself when they weren't. So something I learned many years ago, I would bug Stephen Platt quite a bit back in the day, the extreme days, and so he was always in there at really weird hours. But when he wasn't, it was usually Marlowe inking his pages and stuff in there. They both shared an office for a bit, and I would just kind of go in there and just kind of pick his brain. And he had this thing. I don't know that he really practiced it as much as preached it, but he would tell me never draw a straight line. He had this idea that everything should kind of have a global cast shadow, even if it was a flat object. Especially, you could tell with the muscles, all of his cross hatching was always curved, and I think that was the biggest failure of a lot of the Marvel and DC artists who were trying to clone the extreme look. Even though, it was the Wildstorm look too. Pretty much anything Image, they were trying to retain that fire of all the creators who had left them through a lot of these old school artists who weren't well versed in like crazy anatomy and dynamic shots and stuff like that in the same way that the Image guys were. So all the Image creators, so they would come in and they would say, all Liefeld does is he does a bunch of lines at the bottom of the leg. So they were all doing that, right? And really, like, if you look at it, that's not what he was doing. He was coming in and creating curvature. He wasn't coming in and doing straight. He was coming in and everything was curved, and then by the bottom of it you had like these almost like Scott Williams would do it a lot, where you'd have like the gradient within the curve, and the thick to the thin was still present, as well as it got darker and tighter lines and thicker lines. And they weren't doing that. They're coming in with the straight edge and just hitting it, and I think that's why there was a lot of promising artists doing that, but I really think that was kind of what didn't register with, because readers' eyes will tell them if something looks wrong. We're kind of against the grain of what they're purchasing on a regular basis. So yeah, I'm thinking like this. I might just give him a little clock up here. I don't know. This is always a tough one for me, figuring out how high or to bring it forward. I'll probably just bring it there. Yeah, this is much darker, at least from what I'm seeing here. This is much darker on the paper than it is actually showing. I'm using a non-photo blue pencil. I have hundreds of them, and some of these are older than the rest. Like, I know this is the old Color-Ace Prisma, and then I have the original copy knots. At some point, Prismacolor purchased either the branding or the company that was making the non-photo materials, And I think that was in the 90s. But I've been buying them in bulk for so long that every once in a while I'll come across an old pencil, and you know, I'm like, this pencil's got to be 30 years old, and it's still doing its job. There was a point I remember, I had friends that I'd play baseball with, and artist buddies and stuff back in high school and that, and we would hit up the same art stores and things, and there was I do remember there was a rumor about, it was something about the non-photo blues being discontinued or something, and I think that kind of like put the fear in some of us, because we were just getting the grasp of what materials are used for drawing comics, and the other uses. I mean, these pencils weren't created just for, they were like a drafting supply. So as soon as you hear the sky is falling, you're like, well, I'm gonna unload all this money into this store and pre-order 300 of these things, and it'll get me through until, it's pretty much the pencil version of the toilet paper crisis of 2020, right? And we were all guilty of it. But the nice thing is I haven't had to purchase a non-photo blue pencil in 2 decades. So I can't say the same about toilet paper, though. Yeah, so I think that works pretty well. One of my weak points is foreshortening. For some reason, foreshortening arms. I either get it the first time, or I just fight it, and I'm like, you know what, this elbow's in the wrong place. Oh wait, no, that whole muscle is drawn incorrectly. It's not it's not reflecting what's going on here with here. But I'm happy. I think this looks okay for what it is. Yeah, so apologies to Frege. I'm gonna do it, dude. I'm doing this. He's getting the steak treatment. So another trick that, just because of the way your eyes will work as the artist creating a piece, several times through drawing something, you should I didn't practice this a lot, as much as I should, but flip your drawing upside down. And the way that I was taught is that when you flip an image upside down, as a creator of it, you're going to see what other people are going to see. So if your eyes that you drew are all, they're all wonky and stuff, then you're going to catch that when it's upside down, not necessarily when it's right, when it's right side up as the artist. And a lot of times that's why artists will actually argue. They're like, no, that was drawn fine. Like, I don't know what these people are complaining about. If they would take the time to just flip the image, just flip your whole sheet, flip it upside down, and kind of you got to take a step back and look at it. You know, you'll see, and you'll catch it, and can avoid some redos and mishaps. You know, that was another one that we would do in. I worked several years in gaming industry and doing portrait paints and stuff like that for like in-game live portraits, and that was a big one. Is you know, flipping your canvas. You can get a similar. I feel like you get a better understanding if you do flip it 180 though. I feel like you get a little bit more of a fresh eye approach to what you've been actually doing. So I was immediately catching how off that leg looked with that foreshortening when I flipped it. I didn't see it when I was working on it. That's why I'm bringing this up. Another trick you can do if you're working on something, it could be anything. You know, even painting cars, whatever. Use your phone, take a picture of it, and then kind of, you know, give it a timeout and then take a peek at it, and you'll probably catch, you know, what's lacking, or it might actually enhance. You know, you're like, wow, that's actually a lot better than I thought it was going. So that's a good tool to use as well. There's times where I've done sketch covers and stuff, and you know, I post like an Instagram photo or whatnot, and then I see the picture posted and I didn't catch it. You know, I'll see it like a month later and I look and I'm like, man, that face needs some work. Like I didn't see it in the beginning, but it happens. You know, art is subjective. You know, fortunately, most artists are given a pass for the thousands of errors that we put on paper. And another tool I use this microfiber claws. I use these for eraser dust, of all things. I used to keep them just for the Cintiq and the computer that you see back here, and I figured out I'm like, oh, these are far more useful on a page. I can work with a filthy computer. I can't work with paper with the eraser dust all over the piece. All right, so yeah, I'm pretty happy with this little layout here. Yeah, and I don't do any heavy lifting in this. This is literally just me, just scribbling. And the reason why I don't want to become too attached or married to any of these lines, because what happens is it becomes painful to have to separate from them when you're having to erase an entire leg or things like that. So when you're laying stuff out, I suggest keeping it loose, because there's nothing worse than trying to work something in that you feel like you just completely got correct into a composition that doesn't work the way that one piece is throwing it off, if that makes sense. So sometimes you're better off just redoing it. But yeah, I'm gonna litter him up with punctures and all that. It's been a while since I've used like black splatter, you know, where you get the black ink and you're working it over a spot with the grit. And so I'm thinking already this is going to be a piece which will feature that, just because I did a little bit of it for the bloods, the spackle and spray on that that replicator cover. When I inked it, I came in and hit it. I tried not to go too hardcore on it, but enough where it's visible. And I think it definitely gave it a little bit of an edge, an edginess. But yeah, so that's about where that's at. And apologies if you can't see this very well. Sometimes, so I have a monitor right here in front of me, and I can see all of my recording right here in front of me, just so I'm not getting whiplash from looking over here. And I do notice that after uploading that last video, stuff looked darker, so I kind of figured this one would be okay, and if not, no biggie. All things are small things. All right. Right, I'm probably just gonna, so typical, I'll draw out some tech villains down here that he's taken out. Because you don't just walk around with, 20 swords sticking out of you, right? Like someone did that. Somebody did that to you. Unless you're in the circus doing it to yourself. It's not normal. So I'll just sort of create a couple characters look like there's something straight out of Appleseed. Those were always my favorite. The ones with, like, they don't fly, but they got the wings sticking out the back and all that. They have a very strong, like a silhouette contour look to them. because I spend so much time in my office here working, coloring, drawing, inking, whatever it is. I don't have a whole lot of time to play games, like, you know, video games and all that. So I will usually I didn't even know I can somehow I missed it. I'm a really big Warriors fan of the film, and I did play through and unlock everything in the original the Warriors video game on the PS2, but I had seen that there's a complete walkthrough of the PS4, and then the same poster put up a you know, all the, I guess there's flashback. There's a lot more stuff in the PS4, and so I contemplated, and I'm like, I don't have time as much as I would like to. So I'll just watch someone else beat the whole game, be happy with it. Yeah, so this, yeah. I had conceptualized when I was creating this character, this Ragetality character from the '94 comic book series. I had a little bit of a criteria when I was like doing sketches, and pretty much my two criteria was cool mask, cool face mask, something that looked dynamic to me, and metal arms, just because I really like the look of like the banding. Crazy unrealistic, yet very cool looking metallic arms. I'm a big fan of that. Like the Colossus, and Colossus is my favorite X-Men universe character, so makes sense. Makes sense. All right. So I think this is going to be about it. When I go into the actual doing the line art process, I'm going to go off and get them super gritty. So, all right, that's it for that. And y'all decide. I'm definitely gonna post the inks. Not entirely sure if I'll do the video for the inks though. So